hope that it's not necessary. We hope that Speaker Boehner, Leader Reid, and President Obama are able to come up with an agreement that will ensure that we don't go through what would be a very difficult thing, that is shutting down the government. So I urge my colleagues to support the rule, and I thank my friend for yielding.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, I yield myself such time as I may consume, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's recognized.
I want to thank the gentleman from California, the chairman of the Rules Committee, for giving us his itinerary for the day. I'm glad he's meeting with the leaders of Mongolia, because this is a budget only the people of Mongolia would love, because it is a tough budget on the people of the United States of America. He talks about their commitment to helping the poor in this country. I don't know how you do that when you cut WIC, when you go after Pell Grants, when you go after LIHEAP, programs that
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll yield, gentleman.
I thank my friend for yielding. Let me just say, I mentioned the 82% increase in non-defense discretionary spending. If we look at the increases that have taken place in WIC, LIHEAP, and a wide range of other areas, the notion of slightly paring that back will in no way jeopardize the needs that need to be addressed. And I thank my friend for yielding, Mr. Speaker.
And I reclaim my time. I would just remind my friend, as I did last night, right now there are 30,000 people in this country that are fasting in protest of the cuts that adversely impact the poor. Our former colleague Tony Hall from Ohio, Jim Wallace from Sojourners, David Beckman from Bread for the World are highlighting the fact that the cuts in this budget are going to be devastating to the most vulnerable people in this country. And what I said in the Rules Committee last night is that sometimes we forget to understand that there are real people behind these cuts, and people are going to be hurt. And unfortunately, the people who are sacrificing are the people who can least afford to sacrifice. You're not asking Donald Trump to sacrifice. You're not asking big oil companies to sacrifice, or those big agribusinesses that receive corn ethanol subsidies. No, it's all focused on working people and on poor people. I don't know when, in the minds of my Republicans, that average working people and people who were vulnerable became the bad guys. It was reckless Wall Street behavior that created this financial crisis, and they get everything, and everyday people get nothing, except a bill. That's wrong. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 4 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we meet this morning, the top priority of the American people continues to be the jobs crisis in our country. There are too many people out of work and too many people worried that they're next. Last week, the welcome news came that last month the economy had created about 250,000 new private sector jobs. That's a good start, but it's not nearly enough. Shutting the government down just when the economy is starting to get back on its feet would be the worst possible mistake. But we're on the verge of that. It's important that people understand that the President has gone 3/4 of the way toward the majority party to settle this matter. He didn't meet halfway. He's gone 3/4 of the way. But they won't go the full way because there's a fight here about values. This is a fight about what you value. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we value Medicare. We believe that after someone's worked their entire life and paid taxes into that Medicare fund, that they should not have to worry that a trip to the radiologist will be followed by a trip to the bankruptcy court. This is what Medicare accomplished for our moms and our dads and our grandparents. It said that after a lifetime of hard work, if you have medical worries, they'll just be medical worries, not financial worries, because Medicare will pay the bill. The gentleman from California talked about how they're not destroying Medicare, they're saving it. Let's talk about what they're really doing. Here's what happens. Today, if the senior goes to the radiologist of her choice, Medicare pays most of the bill and she pays a little bit of it. She decides what doctor to pick. She and the doctor decide what happens next, and no private insurance company gets in the way. Medicare pays the bill. What they are proposing is to end that system. So now what will happen under their plan is that the taxes that we pay into the Medicare fund will all be paid to health insurance companies. So we will trust the good hands that so gently guide our health care in the health care industry. We'll give them the money, all of it, and trust them to do the right thing with the health of America's senior citizens. That is the wrong thing to do with the health of America's senior citizens. There is a fight here about values. It's a fight that shouldn't take place. We should settle the budget fight. The President's gone 3/4 of the way to the Republican proposal. Settle it today on that basis. But by all means, we will never yield. We will never concede. We will never concede the point that Medicare should be replaced by private insurance companies. The Congressional Budget Office has said, in analyzing Chairman Ryan's proposal, that the out-of-pocket health care costs for most retirees in America will go up. This isn't spending reform. This is having someone else pick up the tab. The hospitals aren't going to charge less. The doctors aren't going to charge less. The senior is going to pay more to get that coverage, and he or she is going to have to go ask permission from an insurance company as to what radiologist they can see. Then the radiologist will have to ask permission for what test he or she can order. Medicare is not perfect, but it works. We should preserve it and defeat the underlying bill.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield 1 minute to Speaker Boehner.
Gentleman from Ohio, the Speaker of the House, is recognized.
I want to thank the gentlelady for yielding. And the House is preparing to pass a responsible troop funding bill that would fund the Department of Defense through September. It would also cut spending by an additional $12 billion and keep the government running for an additional week. There is no policy reason for the Senate to oppose this responsible troop funding bill that keeps the government running. It reflects a bicameral, bipartisan agreement that was reached in December regarding the troop funding bill, and no senator has objected to the policy in this bill. I think it's past time that we get this responsible troop funding bill enacted, especially when the U.S. has become engaged in a third war. To support job creation in America, we're working to make real spending cuts. We're also working on common sense policy restrictions when it comes to how taxpayer dollars are spent. Talks to resolve last year's budget are progressing, but there is no agreement yet. No agreement on numbers and no agreement on the underlying policies that were passed by this chamber. Now, I think we all know that no one wants a shutdown, and there is absolutely no policy reason for the Senate not to follow the House in taking these responsible steps to support our troops and to keep our government open. I yield back.
Yields back. The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the words of the Speaker of the House. But I would remind my colleagues that when we talk about national security, it needs to include as well the health and well-being of our senior citizens here in the United States. It needs to include the health and well-being of our children here in the United States. It needs to include our infrastructure, our education, the quality of our environment. All those things are part of our national security. And so we all support funding our troops. What we don't support are reckless policies that are aimed at undercutting programs like Medicare and putting our senior citizens at a disadvantage where they will pay more and get less. I mean, this is an ideological battle that we are unfortunately engaged in, where my Republican friends believe that Medicare should be ended as we know it. Medicare as we know it, they want to end. It is clear. And if anyone doubts that, I will tell my colleagues, read the bill. Read the stuff that is coming out of the Budget Committee. Read the bill. Anybody who doubts that Republicans are targeting Medicare, look at what the Budget Committee is doing. It'll be there in black and white when it's published, It'll be there, and states unequivocally that Medicare as we know it will be ended. Senior citizens, according to the CBO, will pay more and get less. That is not what I think the American people want. And I will just remind my colleagues that there's a new poll that came out that 66% of seniors reject the plans to end Medicare as we know it. You know, I think if you interpreted the results of the last election to go after Medicare and seniors' health care, I think you misread the results of the last election. Last election was about jobs. We all need to come together and talk about how we protect jobs and help encourage the creation of more jobs in this country. You want to end the deficit, put people back to work. Here we are in April, and yet you have yet to bring one single bill to this floor that deals with jobs, that helps create jobs, that helps protect jobs. And you know, my friends on the other side of the aisle need to kind of reevaluate their priorities here. Let's get back to what the American people want: a strong economy and good jobs. I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the gentleman from Massachusetts if he is ready to close.
No. I am not. We have a couple more speakers.
Then I'll reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves.
Mr. Speaker, this time I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, to the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Dix.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, how much time is left?
The 6.5 minutes. The gentleman from Massachusetts has 6.5 minutes.
Okay. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Yesterday we met in the Rules Committee to discuss this potential CR, and the point that I wanted to make was I felt that a clean CR, I wish the gentleman from California were here, but a clean CR would be more appropriate at this time, especially if we get an agreement, because that way the President can sign the clean CR, which would keep funding for the troops. Might want to point that out as the ranking member on defense appropriations. And but this CR is troubled in that I believe that the President will veto it. I also believe it won't be passed in the Senate. So why are we doing this? Why are we wasting time here when we should have be focused on getting a clean CR through, which the President said he would sign, that would allow a little more time for negotiations on this agreement? Now, we have got to get an agreement. The idea of shutting down the federal government in the middle of this economic downturn is just the worst possible idea. Goldman Sachs says you'll lose 0.2% of economic growth. This will hurt, they'll put lay people off. Whether they will get reimbursed or not is a major question for those who are not considered to be vital, and I think all workers are vital, but who are not in an essential kind of job. Now, we talked yesterday to the FAA. They will keep operating. We have troops in the field. If we did a clean CR, they would be paid, as I mentioned before. I just think this is a waste of time, and every ounce of effort should be in reaching this agreement. And you know, the administration has bent over backwards. The Senate has bent over backwards. One more minute.
Okay, 30 seconds?
30 seconds, yeah.
Gentleman's recognized for additional 30 seconds.
To try to reach an agreement on this, and the leadership on the Republican side keeps changing the goalpost. First it was $33 billion, now it's $40 billion, and they just can't take yes for an answer. But the most important thing is this will hurt the economy. And also it shows a kind of a mean-spiritedness here of when you're going after Medicare in the budget resolution and Medicaid, and in this deal you're going after women and infant care. This is not what we should be doing. We should be helping the poor people, not taking their safety net away.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to reserve.
Gentlewoman continues to reserve. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1.5 minutes. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Dix has the right idea, which is what we ought to vote on today is a 1-week extension that's clean, that just gets that done, keeps everybody going in the government, including the military, and then resolve our differences. I think that's what we ought to be doing this morning. But what's standing in the way of that is this values debate that I talked about earlier. Look, it's a position that we understand that the majority party does not want to continue Medicare as we've known it for all these years. We strongly disagree with them. And we're prepared to have the fight to say why America needs Medicare as it's always been. But that disagreement should not shut the government down. That disagreement over values should not mean that the functions that people have paid for in their taxes don't go forward. Let's not shut the government down over this values debate. Let's have the values debate as the government continues to operate, and by all means, let's protect Medicare. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts continues to reserve. The gentlewoman from North Carolina.
We'll continue to reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, here we go again, another closed rule, but this rule is different from others. It also includes martial law authority. This means that the Republican leadership can bring any spending bill to the floor at any time they want. So much for read the bill. This is not how the House Republicans said they were going to run the House. Open rules, read the bill, markups, hearings. Their record, Mr. Speaker, is abysmal. And this bill is a perfect example of how they are doing things they said they wouldn't do. A closed rule with martial law authority. I can't say I'm surprised. It's their way or the highway. Yesterday, a group of Tea Partiers were protesting on the steps of the Capitol. It's a wonderful thing to be able to protest and open without any threat of government violence or censorship. It's a very American thing to do. And while they're entitled to their opinion, it's important to point out that they were protesting against keeping the government open. Yes, Mr. Speaker, they want to shut the government down. Just look at the front page of CQ today. A Tea Party member on the steps of the Capitol with a sign that says, "Shut her down." Well, and Republicans in the House are doing their bidding. Enough is enough. It is time to act like adults and negotiate in good faith. It is time to come to a deal that keeps the government open, a deal without partisan ideological riders that prevent health groups from providing important women's health information and health screenings, riders that prevent the EPA from keeping our air and water safe, riders that prevent independent, nonpartisan agencies from reporting in places like Afghanistan, Egypt, and Iraq. Mr. Speaker, it's time that the Republican Party do the right thing for their country and not just for the extremist wing of their party. At the end of this debate, I will oppose the previous question. If the previous question is defeated, I will offer an amendment to provide a clean CR for 1 week. No harmful cuts or ideological riders like those that are included in the Republican bill. The government stays open while President Obama, Speaker Boehner, and Senator Reid continue to negotiate. Now that they're at the table, it's time to let them do their jobs and come to a deal without a continual moving of the legislative goalposts that's going on under the Republican bill. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to defeat the previous question and defeat this closed rule. My friends on the other side of the aisle need to get serious about negotiating an end to this impasse and stop the ideological riders that are attached to this bill. Get serious, and let's get this passed. We can begin to deal with next year's budget. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts yields back his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As our colleague across the aisle said, here we go again. Here we go again with the Democrats misleading the American people about what this rule is about, what this bill is about, the underlying bill. Mr. Dix said he wanted the rule as it is. Our colleagues across the aisle don't want us to be able to take up another bill in case there is an agreement with the President on a long-term CR. There's only one rider on this bill, Mr. Speaker, and that is to not allow taxpayer funding for abortions in Washington, D.C. My colleague across the aisle says national security should include paying for all these government programs. The federal government's the only branch of government that can handle national security, and that means funding our troops. That's exactly what this underlying bill does, Mr. Speaker. Also, our colleague says it's time for people to read the bill. How interesting that when they were in control, they didn't want anybody to read the bills, and they said you wouldn't be able to know what was going to be in the bill till after it was passed. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, there are words for that. I'm afraid I should not use those on the floor today for fear it might slow down our debate here. But I want to say that I am particularly concerned that our colleagues have brought up the issue of values. I'm pleased they brought up the issue of values. Our colleague from New Jersey says what this is, it's about the value of Medicare. Well, Mr. Speaker, it shows what they value are government programs. What we value are life and freedom. There is a distinct difference, Mr. Speaker, in the values of the two parties in this country. One wants more government funding. One wants government control of our lives. The other wants freedom for the American people and life for unborn children. Mr. Speaker, they are misleading the American people. There's nothing about Medicare in this rule or in this underlying bill. We've discussed at great length why America needs this rule and this bill. In the face of a government shutdown, our economy struggling, people are looking for jobs. They demand accountability and belt-tightening in Washington, D.C. They need the federal government to stop draining job-creating resources from the private sector to fund misguided adventures in social engineering. They demand action. They deserve answers. It's for these reasons I urge my colleagues to vote for the rule and the underlying bill so we can begin to restore the trust Americans have in their federal government and restore this economy. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
All time has been expired. The question is on order, and the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I ask for a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman ask for the
I
yeas?
ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote on the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, the 15-minute vote on ordering the previous question will be followed by 5-minute votes on adoption of the House Resolution 206. If ordered, and approval of the Journal, this will be a 15-minute vote on the previous question.
Once again, the U.S. House is debating fiscal year 2011 spending. This is the 7th short-term spending bill, continuing resolution for fiscal year 2011. This bill, H.R. 1363, would continue operations for 1 week through Friday, April the 15th, at levels $12 billion less than current spending. It would also provide full funding for the Defense Department at levels 2% more than 2010. This is initial debate has wrapped up, and they're voting on the previous question. Democrats here proposing a simple, clean spending bill for 1 week with no budget cuts and no military funding as well. This is the previous question vote, 15-minute vote on the House floor, and 2 more 5-minute votes will follow. We hope in the upcoming votes to bring you some comments from the Speaker of the House, or at least the minority leader, the Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, also from Harry Reid, and possibly also John Boehner is expected to have a news conference shortly. A procedural vote, the previous question vote on this continuing resolution in the U.S. House, the 7th one for fiscal year 2011. John Shaw of Market News International joining us on the phone. How much support is this proposed 1 week spending bill going to get later on in the final vote?
Well, I think when they vote on it finally, it's going to get almost unanimous, if not unanimous, Republican support, but virtually no and perhaps no Democratic votes. Republicans say this is a plausible way to keep the government funded while talks continue on the broader bill to fund government until September of this year. Democrats say it's an extraordinarily partisan stopgap bill. As you pointed out, it's for 1 week. It funds the Pentagon for the rest of the year. It cuts $12 billion, which Democrats say is very steep for just a one bill extension. It also includes a raft of policy provisions, which they say have been debated for years, sometimes decades, and to jam them into this stopgap bill they think is provocative and signals that the Republicans are bringing this bill forward largely to protect themselves politically if the government does shut down.
Well, over the last couple of weeks, since the last CR was passed, all of this talk about, on both sides, on reaching an agreement on spending levels through September. We weren't going to pass another continuing resolution. So how did Republicans decide now to pursue this 1 week extension?
Well, I think they are in active talks on the broader bill, but it's clear that these talks are going slowly, and I think this is largely a bill to give some candidly political cover to Republicans that if these talks do not reach an agreement, that they can at least say that they voted for a measure to keep the government running. So it's virtually everyone, including Republicans privately, say this bill is largely a measure to inoculate themselves politically if the government shuts down.
Well, the talks on the longer-term spending bill through the end of the year, those talks continue. But on the floor this morning, the floor of the U.S. Senate, Harry Reid said this short-term measure, this continuing resolution, was, quote, a non-starter. What's going to happen when this bill, if it passes the House, gets over to the Senate?
I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think the Democrats will probably substitute a clean CR along the lines that Mr. Dix was suggesting, just a clean 1 week extension. Republicans would certainly block that. And so I think this is part of the kind of tactical back and forth that is in play. But I think the main event continues to be the talks between the President, the Speaker, Mr. Boehner, the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, trying to reach a broad agreement on funding. It seems Reid was saying on the floor today that the parties are very close on a final bill, but he adds that there's still a lot of policy riders that have been put on the bill at the insistence of Republicans that are just unacceptable for Democrats.
And to be clear, the rule for this short-term measure would allow them, if they were able, to bring a longer-term measure to the floor as soon as possible, correct?
Right. Yes. I think this is a placeholder bill, and I think Republicans have been pretty clear that they have not argued that this is the perfect response, but they say that if the broader talks don't succeed, it's essential to have something in place to keep the government running beyond midnight Friday.
What about those talks? At least the visual ones. The leaders were John Boehner and Harry Reid were at the White House late last night, and now back again this afternoon, scheduled for a meeting at 1 p.m. Eastern. What does President Obama want to talk to him about?
I think he wants to see if a deal is done. I mean, is doable. They've spent a lot of time together. They seem to have narrowed the differences, but I think they're at a point now where they really need to figure out if an agreement can happen. And everyone seemed to leave the White House last night saying that the momentum was positive, that they were narrowing the differences. But then Senator Reid came on the Senate floor about 10 o'clock this morning and said that he thought that things were moving in the opposite direction, that the Republicans were insisting on policy riders that were unacceptable, and this meeting later today at the White House seems to be a last-ditch effort to see if an agreement can be reached before the government begins to shut down on Friday at midnight.
Hey, John Shaw of Market News International, thanks as always for your insight.
Thank you.
And on the House floor, they are voting a previous question vote here, procedural vote ahead of the vote on the rule for this short-term spending measure, which would fund the federal government through Friday of next week, April the 15th, and levels $12 billion less than current spending. It would also, this short-term measure, provide for full funding for the Pentagon, for the Defense Department, at measures at levels 2% more than the current year. So that would take the defense spending all the way through the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. On the House floor, the first of three votes. This is a 15-minute vote on the previous question related to the short-term spending measure, the continuing resolution for fiscal year 2011, what will be, if it passes, the seventh short-term spending measure passed by the U.S. House. We are waiting to, hopefully during this vote, take you live over to the Capitol to hear from Speaker Boehner and his weekly briefing. You may have heard by now that the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid have been called back to the White House for a meeting with President Obama and Vice President Biden, and that's set for 1 p.m. Eastern, and possibly also we'll hear some comments from the Vice President, from Speaker Boehner and from the Majority Leader at that time as well. Harry Reid on the floor this morning talking about the short-term spending measure, the continuing resolution, saying it was, quote, a non-starter in the U.S. Senate. So we'll have to see what happens if and when it passes the House here this afternoon. We are going to take you live now back to the Capitol. Speaker Boehner has just started his news conference. We'll show it to you during this vote.
Looks like I'm going to look different someday.
You wear something else, maybe?
Straight tie.
I can take a picture of you every day. Let me begin by basically restating what I said last night. Talks to resolve last year's budget mess are progressing, but there is no agreement yet. No agreement on the numbers and no agreement on the policy issues that were moved through the House. Everyone's working, well, I don't want to say everyone. I'm going to continue to work to keep the government open, but there's still a disagreement in terms of making real spending cuts. As a precautionary matter, the House today will pass a troop funding bill that would fund the Department of Defense through September. Attached to this troop funding bill will be $12 billion in spending cuts, and it will keep the government open for an additional 7 days. And I expect the House will pass this bill today, and I hope the Senate will follow suit. There's no policy reason for the Senate to oppose this bill. It reflects a bipartisan agreement that was reached in December regarding the funding of the Department of Defense. And we should get this troop funding bill enacted, especially in light of the fact that we are now involved in a third war. As I said from the beginning, our goal is to make real spending cuts to support job creation in our country. And failing to make real spending cuts will just send the signal that Washington is not serious about dealing with the fiscal crisis that we face. It would further erode confidence in our economy and create additional uncertainty and hurt private sector job creation. Americans are also concerned about how much we're spending, but also they're concerned about how we're spending it. That's why we're working not just for the most spending cuts possible, but also common sense policy restrictions on how taxpayer dollars are spent. Looking ahead, Paul Ryan and the Budget Committee put forward a jobs budget that will deal with the drivers of our debt and get America on a plan to prosperity. But for all these things to work and to bear fruit, we need to end the spending binge in Washington, and we need to end it now. That's why we're working to resolve last year's budget in a manner that makes real spending cuts possible to help our economy. We're doing our job today. The House is preparing to pass this troop funding bill that also makes real spending cuts, and I hope the Senate will find a way to support our troops and to keep our government open.
Speaker Boehner, when you consider the stakes here, why do you believe it's appropriate to have a policy issue that deals with abortion rights on this matter when so many people around the country are most concerned about just keeping the government open?
You know, the House took up the funding for this year's government after the Democrats failed to pass the budget last year and failed even in December when they still had supermajorities in the House and Senate and the White House, failed to enact any spending plan for this year. So the House took this matter up in January, and we had a wide-open process. Involved hundreds and hundreds of amendments and days of debate. And the House, in its normal procedure for dealing with spending bills, attached policy riders to it. It's been a long-time practice of the House and the Senate to not only set spending levels, but also dictate how that money is to be spent, because the Constitution requires us to determine how spending will occur. And so the House worked its will, and there are some 40 or 50 policy restrictions that were attached to our bill. We sent it to the Senate. I can't speak to the fact that the Senate hasn't acted in 47 days. This whole process would have been a lot easier if the Senate and the White House actually had a position, but they don't. And so the House has worked its will. I'm proud of how the House worked its will, and all of these policy issues are continuing to be on the table.
At the same time, Speaker Boehner, of those 40 or 50, Republicans are not going to get every policy rider they want.
That'd be correct. That would be correct.
Why fight and hold out for the abortion provision?
There's far more than one provision that's holding up any agreement, I can tell you that.
Mr. Speaker, Hal Rogers, the chair of the Appropriations Committee, said last night that we may eventually have to do what he called a good old plain CR. If that was the need, why don't we do a good old plain CR today rather than this troop funding bill? And are you prepared, and would you have the votes to do a plain CR to keep the government open over the weekend?
There were a lot of options available to us, but I think all of you know that we're going to try to meet the commitment that we made to members and the American people to allow for a 3-day layover of any bill before we brought it to the floor. And over the last weekend, we had to make decisions about what to put online Monday night so that there was ample time for members and the American people to read the bill. And we made a decision last weekend because we're now in 3 wars, because operating under a CR drives up the cost for the Department of Defense. We think it is the responsible thing to do. We believe that the cuts that are attached to this, there's nothing in here that's any deal breaker, and to keep the government open. As you've heard me say, every single time I've addressed this issue, in private and in public, over the last 3 months, our goal here is to cut spending, not to shut down the government.
Speaker Boehner, last night, Leader Reed, he said that he was optimistic that you guys would be able to reach a deal, and then this morning you seemed to indicate that you guys had moved further apart, that the discussions were deteriorating. Do you agree with that, and what seems to have happened over the last 12 hours?
We made some progress last night, or at least I thought we did. But you know, when I see what the White House has to offer today, it's really just more of the same. We're going to have real spending cuts, and I don't know what some people don't understand about this, but this is the first time we've all been in this environment. You know, the first time we've had a Republican majority dealing with this president. First time we've had a Republican majority dealing with this Senate. There's certainly some time. It's taken us some time to get acquainted with each other and to work our way through this. Because understand that this process that we're in is likely to be repeated a number of times this year. So I think everyone is taking their time trying to get this right.
Speaker Boehner, the Senate unanimously passed a bill.
Why are you so loud all the time? You speak up over all your colleagues. You know, it's one thing when you're standing there because you're taller than most of them.
Small huddle, sir. But the Senate unanimously passed a bill that would prohibit members of Congress from getting their pay in the event of a government shutdown. You guys had the same bill attached to a legislation that had no chance of passing the Senate. Going forward, would you guys bring up a clean bill to prohibit you from receiving a salary in the event of a government shutdown similar to hundreds of thousands of federal workers?
We passed a bill similar to the Senate's. We sent it over there, and we're hoping they'll act on it. Thank you.
This morning, Leader Reid reported that you were, what he said, getting closer on the number, and that the real issue were these policy riders. And he named abortion and the clean air policy riders as the two. Is that what these negotiations have come down to?
They have not. I don't think that there is no agreement on a number. In fact, I think we were closer to a number last night than we are this morning. There are a number of issues that are on the table. And any attempt to try to narrow this down to one or two just would not be accurate.
And just to follow up, you said something that you saw from the White House today that made you less optimistic or not so sure you were closer. What from the White House did they put on the table this morning that after your discussion last night?
Well, I don't want to do the negotiations here. While these are very difficult negotiations, you should understand that they're being conducted in a framework where we have people in the room who actually get along with each other and like each other, and which I think will help the overall process. And so negotiating here or disclosing the contents of those private conversations probably is not helpful to our goal of cutting spending and keeping the government open.
Speaker Boehner, you talked about, in your budget, you proposed block granting Medicaid to the states in the name of federalism and local control. But in the CR fight, you're asking for restrictions on funding abortion in D.C. Is there any sort of hypocrisy there?
I know that sounds like apples and oranges to me.
Mr. Speaker, our question under direction of the House General Counsel to defend the defense of Marriage Act in court. Do you have an estimate for how much this is going to cost the U.S. government, including the cost of paying for private lawyer fees? And do you have a plan for how the House will provide oversight for these costs?
I do not have an estimate, but we were placed in a position where we were, in effect, allowing the administration to determine the constitutionality of a bill that passed the United States Congress. Because they were unwilling to defend it. I don't think the House had any choice but to take the position that we were going to defend the work of the Congress, and only the courts are in the position of determining the constitutionality of any bill.
Mr. Speaker, out of you talked about abortion and clean air, are there any specific policy provisions that you're willing to shut down the government over if they're not in the future legislation?
Our goal has never been to shut down the government.
But are there any provisions so important to you, to Republicans, that without their inclusion you would not agree to?
We're going to continue to work our way through all of this, and there's no reason to draw any lines in the sand to make this more difficult than it already is.
Sir, how important is it?
Paul?
There is a line in the sand. It's tomorrow night. At what point, what we've seen each day is the morning and afternoon starts with a lot of bravado, and at nighttime you guys seem to get back towards optimism. When do you make these decisions? At what point?
I'm glad you recounted that history for me. I haven't quite felt that way this week.
The third straight day that started off.
Oh, really? Yeah. Listen, we do public policy here in Washington, and we do it in a political setting. This is what makes America a little different than every other country in the world.
On this vote, the yeas are 238 and the nays are 185. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Does the gentleman from Massachusetts ask for a recorded vote?
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The gentleman asked for a recorded vote. A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And this is a vote on the rule for the 7th short-term spending measure for fiscal year 2011, funding the federal government through Friday, April the 15th, at levels $12 billion less than current spending. It would fund the Pentagon, the Defense Department, through the end of the fiscal year. 5-minute vote. We'll take you back to Speaker Boehner, who appears to be Well, he has just wrapped up his briefing. We'll show all of that to you later in our program schedule. Should the rule pass, they'll have an hour of general debate, no amendments allowed, but they will allow for one motion to recommit. And during this 5-minute vote, we're going to take you to some comments from Harry Reid on the Senate floor this morning, saying he's, quote, not nearly as optimistic about avoiding a government shutdown. Here's Senator Reid from this morning.
Mr. President, approximately 11 hours ago, I was at the White House with Speaker Boehner, and we made a joint statement to the press in the nighttime there at the White House. At that time, I was cautiously optimistic that we could complete the work on the people's business to fund the government to the end of this fiscal year, October 1st. Now, Mr. President, we're 38 hours away from this deadline of the government shutting down. So it's clear from the math that we're less than 2 days. In less than 2 days, a decision must be made as to whether the government closes or stays open. Whether we put the American people first and reach an agreement, or have, as I will explain in a few minutes, issues having nothing to do with government funding cause the government to shut down. We met last night, the Speaker and I, with the President for quite a long time, hour and a half or 2 hours. The meeting was initially one with the President, Vice President, Speaker Boehner, and myself were present to try to work through these issues. We then went into a meeting with our staffs to try to work through these issues. The numbers, Mr. President, are basically there. That's where we are. My staff, President's staff, Speaker's staff worked through the night to try to come up with the appropriate way to end this impasse. Now, I repeat, Mr. President, the numbers are basically there. But I am not as nearly as optimistic, and that's an understatement, as I was 11 hours ago. The numbers are extremely close. Our differences are no longer over how much savings we get on government spending. The only thing holding up an agreement is ideology. I'm sorry to say, Mr. President, that my friend, the Speaker, and the Republican leadership have drawn a line in the sand, not dealing with the deficit that we know we have to deal with, that we've made significant cuts, not with the numbers that would fund the government to the end of this fiscal year. That's not the issue. The issue is ideology, not numbers. And there are a number of issues, but the two main issues that are holding this matter up are women, the choice of women, reproductive rights, and clean air. These matters have no place on a budget bill, Mr. President. This is a bill to keep the government running with dollars. They want to roll back the Clean Air Act. The bottom line is this. If we are going to sit down at the negotiating table, as we have, and fund the government, it should be based on government funding. I know there are some rambunctious new members of the House of Representatives over there, and there are probably some who have been there in a long time who are more senior, who are Republicans, and this is their time to shine. But do that in legislative manner. Don't do it on a spending bill. They can send us stuff. We'll get over here. We'll get to it when we can to show that we can get to things. We've done it on this Clean Air Bill, very difficult issues, dealing with 1099. That's government issues relating to the health care bill. It's tough. We did it. We had a bunch of votes yesterday on EPA funding. We can legislate, and we can do that on issues that are difficult. We showed that this week in the Senate. But no one can realistically think we can walk out of a room and suddenly agree on a matter that's been around for we can't walk out of a room and focus on an issue that's been around for 4 decades. The issue relating to choice. This is a legislative matter. We can't solve in one night a disagreement this country has been fighting for 4 decades. There are very, very definite sides that have been taken.
On this vote, the yeas are 228, the nays are 189. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Resolution is adopted. House will be in order. The 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 House will come to order. Members will take their seats, remove their conversations from the floor. For what purpose does the Majority Leader rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for 1 minute for the purpose of informing the members of a change in the upcoming legislative schedule.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to inform my colleagues that the House will meet at 10 a.m. for morning hour and 12 p.m. for legislative business tomorrow. As the members know, this is a change from the original calendar. Due to ongoing negotiations, Mr. Speaker, surrounding continued appropriations for the remainder of fiscal year 2011, I believe it is both appropriate and necessary for this House to be in session tomorrow. I expect legislative business to include, but may not be limited to, H.J. Res. 37, a resolution of disapproval regarding the FCC's recent Internet and broadband industry practices regulation ruling. Votes are possible at any time afternoon tomorrow. At this point, it is too early to tell whether the House will need to be in session this weekend. In the case of lapse in appropriations, however, I fully expect the House to meet. Mr. Speaker, we will not leave town until we have fulfilled our obligation to cut spending, to begin getting our fiscal house in order, and to keep Mr. Speaker, we are.
House will come to order.
Mr. Speaker, we are committed to getting our fiscal.
Gentleman will suspend. The House will come to order.
Mr. Speaker, we are committed to getting our fiscal house in order and to keep the government functioning. Therefore, members should keep their schedules for this weekend as flexible as possible, and I yield back.
I thank the Majority Leader for yielding, and I share his view that we ought to keep the government running for not only the sake of our economy, but for the sake of all those that rely on the federal government. My friend has made the observation in the past that shutting down the government, and I believe the Speaker has made the same observation, was not a rational policy for us to pursue. I ask the gentleman because I believe that the resolution that we will be considering will not either pass the Senate nor be signed by the President. In light of that, and in light of the fact that the Majority Leader of the Senate and the Speaker have both indicated that negotiations are ongoing, would the gentleman agree to a unanimous consent that we, as we have done so often in the past, when the majority Democrats that were in control of the House and the Senate disagreed with President Bush, that we would have a hold in place, unanimous consent, continuing resolution, not changing the status on either side of the negotiations for 7 days, which would give the parties the opportunity to come to an agreement. My understanding from the Leader of the Senate is that we have agreed to some $70 billion in cuts, which is a substantial way towards what you wanted and a show that we share the view that we need to have fiscal restraint. So I asked my friend if I made a unanimous consent request that we continue the government authority to stay in running until next Friday without changing the status quo so that neither party would be disadvantaged and that our government would, in fact, as the gentleman observes as his objective, be able to stay in service to the American people.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd respond to the gentleman to say that there's no indication in any definite way that the Senate would not take up and pass the piece of legislation that we would bring up today. As a response to the second part of his inquiry regarding our going along with the unanimous consent, I would say to the gentleman, no. We don't accept the status quo. Mr. Speaker, America is broke. That is why we are trying to address the need. That is why we are trying to address the need to get our. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman's correct. House is not in order.
Mr. Speaker, that is why we are trying to address our fiscal crisis and to get the debt under control. Mr. Speaker.
Will the gentleman yield? Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
I want to inform the gentleman that the White House has just issued an intent to veto the resolution that you are offering. I tell my friend that if, in fact, the gentleman wants to keep the government running while negotiations proceed, we have already agreed to a substantial billions of dollars in reductions in spending for 2011. We did so, and we've agreed on that. As a matter of fact, as the gentleman knows, I have voted for both of the previous resolutions. I believed both of those could pass, and in fact, I was correct. They did pass. I tell my friend this resolution, in my view, will not pass. However, it is my understanding that both the Speaker and Mr. Reid and the President are continuing to have discussions to try to overcome this impasse. That is the legislative process. We never shut down the government when we had the majority and President Bush was in power. And the reason, and I tell my friend, the reason we did not shut it down is because...
House will come to order. Gentleman will suspend.
Is because we agreed with the premise you have stated and the premise the Speaker has stated, that shutting down the government was not a process that was useful for our economy, for jobs, for our people, or for the services that are expected of us. What is useful is for us to rationally provide a context in which negotiations, which quite obviously have not yet been completed, are completed. Now, you've heard me talk about the Perfectionist Caucus. You can't get it all your way. We can't get it all our way. But in fact, the American public overwhelmingly elected President Obama for a 4-year term. He's in office. Now, Mr. Gingrich said that we were ignoring the 2010 election results. We observed that the 2008 election results were regularly ignored by your side of the aisle in the last 2 years. What I am saying to my friend, there is a rational way for us to proceed. And very frankly, when we were in your shoes, we did so, when we couldn't reach agreement with President Bush.
House will come to order.
Now,
House will come to order.
The Tea Party on your side, as so often is the case,
Mr. Speaker,
as is so often the case,
reclaiming my time.
As is so often the case,
Mr. Speaker, reclaiming my time.
Gentleman reclaims his time. Majority
Mr.
Leader.
Speaker, I would say let us look at why we are where we are to begin with. We are, Mr. Speaker, House is not in order.
House will come to order.